I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. And our first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so, and you can do it now or when it arises on the agenda. None declared. Then the next item on the agenda is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have none of those. And item 4 is delegations. And this evening we have Rob Blue and Christine Flaherty from the Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey. Welcome. And come to the podium and turn the... Thanks for coming out.
Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Vice Deputy Mayor, Councillors, members of the Saugeen Shores family, hockey family, and guests. My name is Rob Blue, and I'm president of Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey. I would like to thank you for giving us an opportunity to present tonight. I hope you will consider the issue of ice costs as an important one that needs to be addressed in our community. The word community cannot be explained by one definition alone, but each definition has one thing in common. Community involves a group of people. Saugeen Shores is a community, a place where people live, work, and play together. We come together as a community when we share a common goal or experience, whether it's enjoying a concert at the beach, supporting a barbecue for a family who's lost everything in a house fire, or watching our young people participate in sports. Having a sense of community is what makes Saugeen Shores such a great place to live, work, play, and raise a family. Minor hockey is the foundation of many communities across Ontario and Canada as a whole. People from all different social and economic groups come together at our local rinks, our children, and their participation and team spirit. Minor hockey associations are non-profit groups in our communities whose goal is to foster the development of the game and its players. We want to promote a healthy, active lifestyle for our young people. Hockey Canada believes that every player should have the chance to participate in the great game of hockey, to learn the skills of the game and be given the opportunity to achieve a sense of accomplishment through their participation. But the chance to participate in the game of hockey is threatened by rising costs of equipment, travel, and ice rentals. Every minor hockey association is faced with this problem. Solutions need to be found so our young people are able to play the game that they love in the community that they live. Ice costs continue to rise in Saugeen Shores. Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey Association has been forced to look at alternatives in order to keep the registration costs down and ensure that every person that wants to play hockey in Saugeen Shores can afford to do so. This year, a majority of families paid $600 in registration fees to cover the cost of playing in Saugeen Shores. For every dollar that a parent spends on registration, 65 cents goes directly to pay in ice costs. The other 35 cents goes towards referees, equipment, photos, registration, insurance, and training of our coaches. It is very difficult to expand our program and develop our players when we do not have enough money to do so. Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey Association executive is currently debating the advantages and disadvantages to moving some of our home games and practices to arenas outside of our community. Research is showing that our operating costs will drastically change if we move games and practices to arenas in Chesley, Tara, Paisley, and even Walkerton. Surrounding communities charge their associations significantly less than Saugeen Shores, and these cost savings cannot be ignored. This year in Saugeen Shores, the rate for primetime ice is set to increase to $144.58 per hour. The municipality of Erin Elderslie, which includes rinks in Tara, Paisley, and Chesley, charges $113 an hour for ice rentals. Why can Erin Elderslie offer ice at a published rate that is 30% less than Saugeen Shores? They have facilities that are far older than the Plex and Coliseum, yet they do not pass these costs on to nonprofit organizations like minor hockey. Our association is aware of these ice costs because our rep teams book ice outside our community when they require extra practices. Team-funded ice is rarely if ever, booked in Southampton or Port because they cannot rent, because they can rent ice at a lower cost outside of town. Saugeen Shores Mining Hockey Association is looking for a fair price for ice purchases in its community. Our association purchases the majority of ice that is used in both the Coliseum and the Plex. If we move some of our games and practices out of Saugeen Shores, the impact to the community would be great, not only financially, but socially as well. The sense of community would be lost as teams would be forced to call other towns home. It is important that Council understands the impact of increasing costs of ice in our community. Saugeen Shores needs its minor hockey players to stay in our arenas. We need to keep the sense of community alive and well. We need to promote healthy, active living in our towns and encourage our young people to get involved in team sports. But when costs get out of hand, parents will not be able to afford to register their children in sports and keep them active. It is also important to attract families to the area. When people move to a new location, they research the town and benefits it would bring to their family. If it is too expensive to be part of the community, they will look elsewhere. We need these families in Saugeen Shores. Keeping rental costs down is vital to the success of a strong minor hockey program. Respectively, we understand it is very expensive to operate the 2 arena facilities we have in Saugeen Shores. The Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey Association would like to better understand all the association costs and work with the town of Saugeen Shores to find cost savings and come to an agreement on a fair ice rental cost in the future years. Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey would like to contribute as a stakeholder in the upcoming Master Recreation Plan. We believe the plan should study recreation costs, and the process should allow us both to agree to a price that is adequate and fair, with scheduled annual increases that allow Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey and the town to participate in the increase and properly budget for the increase each year. In closing, Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey Executive sincerely hopes that Council will consider its decision to increase the cost of ice this season and instead freeze rates at the 215 values, as we hope the town of Saugeen Shores will allow Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey to be a stakeholder in the development of a Master Recreation Plan in 2016 and cooperatively discuss annual ice costs that will ensure the success of minor hockey in Saugeen Shores for years to come. On behalf of Saugeen Shores Minor Hockey Executive and the 400 minor hockey players in Saugeen Shores, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and your consideration for ice rental costs now and in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob. Just thanks for that. Before we go, I'll make sure that any committee member, Councillor Mallison, questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you, Rob, for your presentation tonight. I'm in total agreement with what you have said. I too believe that the rates are too high. As chairman of the Recreation and Active Transportation Committee, our committee endorsed a rate freeze until the proposed fee study was completed. I hope Council will take what you said to heart and agree that instead of raising our rates, we do what we have done with all other recreational fees and freeze them until such time as this rate study is completed and we determine what reasonable rates are. I don't like seeing residents of Saugeen Shores leaving town to rent cheap rice in other communities, and I believe that it is in this chamber that we can rectify this problem by revisiting the issue and doing what is right. So thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I realize this isn't a real debate about or a discussion about the item, but just for clarity, I'd like to, through you, ask a question about the actual rate. It's yes, in our fees and charges schedule, it shows about $144 an hour for primetime ice rental. However, that doesn't take into account that the town provides a subsidy to minor hockey of almost, it's between $45,000 and $50,000 a year, which means that the average price of ice time is not that $144. Is there a number that we've calculated that is the actual rental rate for minor hockey here? And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, it certainly fluctuates for minor hockey based on the number of hours they book for the year, and it fluctuates anything from, as an example, last December was $101 per hour to an example for last January was $118 per hour. So the average for a season for minor hockey for last year was $112 an hour.
Thank you. I know that at the Recreation and Active Transportation Committee, we're looking forward to the master plan unfolding, and yes, minor hockey will be part of all of that, as will a number of other stakeholders. The skaters will be in there too, I'm sure. What hopefully will come out from that is that there will be some research done about how we sort of fit in the mix in the area. But every arena is struggling, and just when I saw this deputation, I went through and tried to look up some stuff for the arenas around here, and it is interesting. You know, Paisley had one day last year where their arena was completely shut down, and then this year that day is open, and then the Terra Arena on that day isn't open until 2 o'clock, and we're talking about a Saturday. And it's you know, everybody has to make choices. Kincardine, when you look at their council minutes, you'll see one meeting where it was suggested that the Tiverton Arena not even have ice in it, that they turn it over to an indoor soccer facility. So it's a very multi-layer discussion related to fees. But I appreciate that you were here. I live right beside the rink in Southampton, so I see minor hockey people and skaters and other people in there all the time. I think the Recreation Master Plan is going to give us a lot of background information and also give us a chance to think about a number of elements that play into the cost of running a facility and then the subsequent revenue sources that can help us do that, because we can't just continue to have the cost of running facilities keep going up because we keep adding new facilities. So at some point there has to be some justification. So I just think that it's important that we look at the dollar figures and keep in mind that we do provide some support in a different direction, that the number that's on the chart isn't always the number that's sort of in play with that particular group in the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming in. I sympathize with the fees. My son played hockey for a number of years in Ann Arbor, and the last year he was playing in about 2003. His annual fee was over $1,000. That's, you know, it's hard. And then you count everything else in, the travel costs and equipment and everything like that. My question is about the subsidy. How does that work? I mean, maybe Jane could ask that, or your understanding of that, Rob?
It seems to be something that there isn't an understanding of. I have asked some people as to how it's calculated. Is it guaranteed every year? Where did it originate from? Is it provincial or is it strictly local? So I'm not sure that I have the answer for that.
Okay. Jane, I'm sure does.
My understanding is the subsidy dates me probably from Port Elgin's days, and it was an allotment provided for minor sports groups, and it's split between 5 different groups actually. And so minor hockey being one of them, skating club, breakers. So it's an allocated amount. All 5 of those groups, the dollar figure. I can't honestly remember the last time it was increased. Quite some time. I'm gonna say 15 years at least. So.
Excuse me, is the 63,000 split?
It is split, and
do you know how much minor hockey gets from that?
I can tell you what minor hockey got for 2015. They got 47.
Or is it cut?
No,
is
what
it,
it's
is
done,
it on the fees?
It's deducted from their monthly statements, from their monthly invoices. So they will be issued an invoice that indicates what if it's prime time hours or non-prime time hours. Obviously, it's going to be mostly prime time hours, and then it's deducted from their monthly.
Okay, thank you.
I think just as a comment, the origin of and I briefly recall some of the discussions around it started also was that the swimmer in the pool was recognizing the very problem that you raised tonight, that there was rates that were thought to be driving people out to other areas, and so I believe there was a consultant, and probably Neil can talk to this, but there was a consultant engaged by Port Elgin that said this is the scheme perhaps that is most effective, is instead of is a direct subsidy from the tax base to those. So I think that, you're right. I don't recall us discussing increasing that for a number of years, but it is one of the options in this whole scheme, I think, that we probably should consider.
If I may add, it is somewhat unique to Saugeen Shores. When I did a lot of my investigations, what I typically would find is that there would be youth fees or youth rates and adult rates in a lot of
Yeah, it would have been a report a number of years ago. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is through you to ask if Jane is going to help us get some clarity between the apples and the oranges here. The reason I say that is we knew going into a new arena that operating costs would be lower in the beginning and would rise as the years went forward, and those were all in the original study reports. So we're going to be faced with this challenge. We've got faced with a new pool coming our way. There needs to be some kind of dialogue, some discussion that says we're running micro businesses within a business. So running an arena, running a pool is a business. And there is fair game between what the taxpayer at large should be paying as a percentage and what the user should be paying as a percentage. And I ask if Jane is going to be able to provide that in her study report findings, that if we deal with a percentage, if we always say that 40, 50, 60% of the facility's operating costs, capital costs are always going to be borne by the taxpayer at large, and that some other number is always going to be borne by the users, I think that might sift this problem to something that we can work with from a business approach. So my question is, will our Director of Community Services be able to include that in her study report?
There is some language that refers to the fees and charges, and we can certainly discuss with the consultant to provide us some verbiage in regards to what you have requested. Certainly, through my experience with plans such as this, they do typically provide what should be reasonable this size, and they'll do a number of things. So I'm hoping that through this process, we will certainly identify through this council that it be part of the Recreation Master Plan. It is included, that we will come to some answers if we are where we should be, if we should be higher, or if we should be lower.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming in and doing the presentation. Obviously, there's lots of things to consider. I just wanted to say that on the weekend, on Sunday, Councillor Rich and I, we had our 6-year-old sons at Ripley playing a game for $75 ice, and as much as nice as it was to get $75 ice, it was you got to get down there, you got to go all the way to Ripley, you got to drag your kids down there, and it was one thing on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, but it's a total different thing on a Wednesday night when we have games. And I mean, you guys know how that is. I mean, it's impossible to do that with your kids. And so I just want to say that you guys have a real partner in Saugeen Shores. I mean, that the subsidy alone that we've provided, although it hasn't gone up, is demonstration enough that the desire for the town of Saugeen Shores and Port Elgin and Southampton before it was to provide a reduced rate to minor sports so that we could ensure that kids get the opportunity to play these sports in this community, and that they can do it in this community. And that continues to be the commitment of Saugeen Shores. So I'd really encourage you not, at least in 2016, to consider moving more out of the town of Saugeen Shores. I ask you not only as the deputy mayor, but as a member, or as a person who has a son and you're a member of your organization. And I think we can work with you through this process. And I guarantee you, there's a lot of uptake and acceptance to the idea of including you in this rec master plan and making sure that your input's heard as we study the rates. And give us that time to do this study. We're going to treat you fairly, because because we want these young people to play these sports. That's why we built these facilities, right? That's why we built them. So I'd really encourage you to take that message back to your board, and I know we'll be reaching out to you through the director and individually to work through this over the coming months. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Rob. I have a comment and a question. My comment is that, and I concur, I agree with our deputy mayor in that we do have a $10,000 user fee study happening in the next month or two, and we'll be discussing pool rates, breaker swim team, ball rates, ice rates as a whole gambit of rates that are going to be discussed as part and studied as part of that $10,000 report. So I'm of the opinion too that I think if we'd exercise a little patience and see what the results of that study bring, Rob, I think that if we in fact find that our rates are that much higher after that study comes out in the spring, early summer, then absolutely, I think we as a council need to have that conversation. But I think to change, one rate today, there's a breaker swim team, there's a whole lot of other groups that we need to be taking a look at as well, rather than just choosing one rate and freezing or lowering. So I'm with you. If we find that our rates are at the point where they are far too high and that we're driving people out of this community, then I think we absolutely need to talk about that. But again, I think we just need to exercise some patience and let's work closely with minor hockey and figure skating and all our youth groups and make sure that our rates are correct. But we'll know that this summer.
Councillor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for your presentation, Rob. It was great. I don't want to reiterate what a lot of other people have said. I think that you will find that there's a lot of appetite around this table to make sure that groups in the community and make things better for everyone so that more kids and more adults can use the facilities and that we continue to build a great community. But I'd like to sidestep a little bit here. So, as far as I understand, hockey takes up about 75% of the ice. Figure skating takes up about 15% of the ice. These are just general numbers as far as I understand. And then we pay subsidies back to them to reduce their rates for the ice. That doesn't really kind of make sense to me. Why don't we just charge a little bit lower if they're using 95% of the ice anyway, and just charge a lower rate instead of taking money in and then sending the money back? What's the advantage to that, Jane?
Like I said, it's unique to Saugeen Shores. Here was certainly part of that process. Some shared with you. At the time, it probably made sense. If it's this council's desire to go back and review that, to look at if you want to have a youth rate, then we can well. But at the time, it probably, as I said, made sense.
Yeah, and again, I just briefly, and I'd have to really put my thinking cap on, because it was not just specifically about the one facility. It was all facilities, and it was in an effort to try and ensure that we had at the time people were leaving for these reasons, or perceived this reason. And this consultant came along and said, the consultant said, here's one option, and it was adopted at that time.
I'm just wondering, does minor hockey have, seeing that you're seeing the rates, in your view are higher than maybe they should be, and perhaps there are people parents in the community that cannot afford for their kids to play hockey. Does minor hockey have a subsidy program? If not, would you consider a subsidy program for needy families, or where are you at with subsidization for needy families? We don't subsidize directly, but the Jumpstart for Kids program does, and they can put in up to 100%. A lot of it's around the 50% mark, but Jumpstart for Kids is a subsidy that we recommend. We don't directly ourselves.
Further comments? Well, thanks very much, Rob. I think I hope you'll go away with there's an understanding that we certainly want to deal with this issue in the way that we think is fair for everybody involved, and I think you have that commitment from not only staff but council. So thanks for what you do for our community, and thanks for the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.
The next item on the agenda is a general government staff report, and it has to do with our council strategic plan, and our CAO, Larry Allison, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the visioning session organized for the incoming council early in the term, a list of priority capital and other related projects was identified to be undertaken over the coming few years. The undertaking of a strategic plan to identify a long-term vision for the community is ranked lower on the report study-related priority items. As a result, the implementation staff report brought forward in August and the capital forecast currently under consideration shows the plan is occurring towards the end of the current term of council, straddling the next municipal election period. Based on the enhanced priority given to the preparation of such a plan as identified by the organizational review consultants recently, staff is proposing that the current time frame for the project be moved forward and that funding be considered in 2016. If supported by committee, a new project would be added to the items for consideration at the budget meeting next week. And if approved there, staff is confident that an appropriate scope of work could be defined with the assistance of the striking committee and confirmed by council. Thereafter, we could have the project underway and potentially having it done towards mid-year.
Thank you, Larry. Then the recommendation is that council commit to undertaking a strategic plan in early 2016, and that the draft 2016 capital budget be amended to accelerate the proposed timeline for the project from 2019 to 2016. Comments, questions? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that I think is very important for us to include in any kind of strategic planning exercise is to build in enough time for meaningful public engagement. And I'm just wondering, I mean, there's really no description. I know it says that the striking committee is going to be kind of deciding what that would involve. How do I go about making that request?
Through Mr. Mayor, the conversation we've had at the striking committee has already touched on that subject, and I think we acknowledge that there needs to be some reach out to stakeholders and others in the community before it's developed. And I think the report indicates the scope of work would be defined and confirmed by council, so you'll have an opportunity to have a kick at it.
No further comments, then all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any, that's carried. The next item on the agenda is a staff report and has to do with amendment to the procedural bylaw, and our clerk, Linda White, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Effective January 1st, 2016, the Municipal Act was amended. The Act now requires municipal councils and local boards to go into closed session while discussing subject matter that relates to an ongoing investigation by the Ombudsman. In order to comply with and implement the recent amendment to the Municipal Act, it is necessary to amend Section 3.8.2 of the town's procedural bylaw to include this recently enacted provision for closed sessions. The attached amending bylaw is being recommended for council's consideration. The remainder of the report is provided for your information.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that council adopts the recommended amendment to the procedural bylaw. Questions, comments? If none, all in favor of the recommendation. Opposed, if any, that is carried. The next item is staff report, and it has to do with architectural services for the Dr. Earl Medical Clinic Phase 3 expansion, and our CAO will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council approved a physician services agreement with Dr. Gibb last fall. Dr. Gibb, as we noted, intends to establish a large full-time practice in the fall of 2016. At the time of consideration of that agreement, staff noted it would be necessary to accelerate the planned future completion of the remaining medical suite in the clinic in order to allow Dr. Gibb sufficient space to establish her practice. Accordingly, the draft 2016 capital budget contemplates funding for this work to proceed. However, in order to meet the timeframes for tendering and construction to occur as soon as possible, it is also necessary to engage the architect at this time in order to allow the drawings to be completed, a building permit to be obtained, and tendering materials to be prepared for issuance shortly after the planned budget adoption in February or March. GM Demert Architects were engaged by the town to undertake the first phase of the clinic work in 2007 and 8. They were also directly engaged by Home and Community Support Services of Grey Bruce to undertake the design and supervision work associated with the space that they have leased from us in 2012 and 13. Staff note that as part of that renovation, a number of the components of the remaining medical suite, the subject of this report, were roughed in by the contractor. The work the firm completed in the building on behalf of the town and HCS has been quite satisfactorily. Administratively, given both the time constraints and the amount of work already completed by the firm within the building, it is recommended by staff that the firm be directly engaged by the town to complete the remaining aspects of the project. We did receive the proposal that's attached to this report in December, and it outlines the scope and the costs, and we note the fees are consistent with industry standards, and the selection of the firm at this time is recommended by staff.
Thank you, Larry. Then the recommendation is that GM Demert Architect Incorporated be retained to provide the required professional services associated with the completion of the design work, tendering, and project management services for the remaining medical space in the Dr. Earl Medical Clinic. Questions or comments? I'll start with Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification, that the $14,700 is included in the $250,000 that was approved for this project.
$14,700 is included in the amount that's proposed for this project that you have not yet approved.
Proposed, okay, thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Well, my question, I have a couple of follows along that line. So by voting on this now, are we not effectively passing something else that, you know, it's sort of premature in that regard? I am curious to know, though, when you look at the $14,700 or whatever the number is there, it's almost $15,000. About a third of it relates to project management during the construction phase. And when you look further into the document, it basically suggests that the architect or his firm would be on site 3 times during that process. Haven't we normally been able to take care of some of that on our own? And I would be curious to know, did we, and I realize that this engineer or this architectural firm has been involved in this particular building in the past, but did we even consider any other architect? Because, you know, certainly this name shows up an awful lot, and often it's without any kind of process that includes consideration of other architects. So I just would like to know, is this a single source situation, or did we actually ask anybody else for a quote? Thank you.
I'll try to do those in order. The first question, briefly was it is not. It is approving the design work and preparation for tender. If the budget is not approved for the overall work, it would not proceed. So you're not pre-committing yourself. Second question. When we have a full suite of staff, we might have considered it. Third question was, did we consider anybody else? Frankly, no.
Councillor Minaj.
I would ask for the summary answer that says this is a large family-only practice. That's what it says, and that there's sufficient space required for that. So the remaining space in the center was originally for 1, 2, or 3 new practicing doctors, and this large family-only practice is taking how much of the remaining space?
This practice will occupy the remaining unfinished space, but we are working with the architect to ensure that it can be shared with another doctor in the future. It requires some reconfiguration of the original plan that was devised a number of years ago by this architect. So we are taking some steps to try and maximize efficiency for the remaining space to accommodate a second doctor.
Question, please, Mr. Mayor, then. Do we have the terms of numbers of this extra space that we're creating? Is it a luxury space, or is it a luxury space for 600 family, large big space, or is it for 1,200 or 1,600 people coming in because it is a large practice? I'm trying to understand the words in the document. Thank you.
I will provide information to you as to what her commitments and her physician services agreement are in terms of practice size.
Any other questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Next item is Environmental Services and Transportation Staff Report, and it has to do with applications to the newly resurrected Connecting Link program. And our Director of Public Works, Stuart Doyle, will present.
Yes, it felt like we fought hard for this, but I'm not sure we're going to get the results we were hoping for, but we'll be optimistic nonetheless. So briefly, the province did announce the revival of the recently canceled Connecting Link program several years ago. This fund, for those who weren't around, is for municipalities who do have designated Connecting Link corridors located in their communities. In all, there's 77 communities in Ontario that are eligible for the $15 million funding envelope. So there's a $15 million envelope to spread around to 77 municipalities. And so they've explained it as, with other recent funding opportunities, approval is not solely determined on a municipality's financial position, but more on the merits of the project. However, as stated, it's going to be a very competitive process. So applications are due on January 29th, and as the town has 2 Connecting Link segments, one in Port Elgin, one in Southampton, we're eligible to submit 2 separate applications, one for each segment. So what staff is proposing at this time is Project 1 is extending the box culvert on Railway Street. This current structure was built in 1967. It's located approximately 140 meters north of McNabb Street. The current design of the culvert is narrow and only extends approximately 5 feet past the edge of the traveled portion of the road, and there's a significant grade change from the road surface to the creek bottom. I've attached some photos for your information. The proposed project would extend the culvert length in either direction, approximately 7 meters. Town staff has had a bridge consultant review the project briefly and has provided an opinion on costs and other factors to provide supplemental information with the application. This project was also contemplated back in 2000, but also didn't carry forward at that time. Project 2 would be a pavement rehabilitation project on Godhra Street. This is a project that's currently identified in 2017 for the future capital forecast. The current road was built in 1989 and expanded to a 4-lane cross-section at that time, and since then we've had some road issues start with the longitudinal and transverse cracking, as well as we've had some drainage issues there. So in summary, the program guide, the objectives are to address, so the number one, and by far what they're stressing, is to address critical Connecting Link infrastructure, extend the life of the asset, cost effective, and ensure safe and efficient movement of provincial traffic. So I'm assuming, or obviously up to council, these would be 2017 capital projects, so would have no commitment in 2016, and I've added the cost, the financial impact cost that we've looked in for both these projects. So in 2017 to be a contribution of just shy of $72,000.
Thank you very much, sir. The recommendation is that council pass a resolution supporting the applications for the Connecting Links program as follows. Project 1, box culvert extension on Railway Street. Project 2, road rehabilitation project on Godhra Street. Questions or comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Through you to Stuart, could you perhaps make a couple of additional comments about project number 1? The location of this culvert, within the last couple of years, there's been a significant spend by a volunteer group, the Rail Trail Association, on creating the Hurricane Hazel site, because that's exactly where the blowout of the train tracks happened. Would this work disrupt all of that, or like the road would basically, you'd be digging up that chunk of the road and replacing the whole box underneath, correct?
Incorrect. No.
Okay.
So all we'd be doing, we'd be leaving the road as is. We'd be extending the box culvert and putting new wing walls on the end. We've spoken to the engineer about how to work with that. You know, the extension of that wooden frame that we put in several years ago. That would also be obviously fall in the design stage, which we're not there yet. But it's obviously something we would have to work with and try to integrate with. Yeah.
Councilor Minaj.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My questions for Stuart are the PCI number for the Barnes Ave to Louis Street. And 27 years for a major road asset. That seems like an extraordinarily low number. Is that some sort of reasonable expectation, 27 years?
I'm not sure what number you're referring to.
Well, number 19, Project 2 in Port Elgin Connecting Link.
Yeah.
You said it was paved in 1989?
Yes.
And 2016 is 27 years, correct?
Your math is correct, yeah.
So it just seems to me like for a major, do we need a different consideration? Does the traffic count say that the road surface should be different? The PCI count, does it say it should be different as an asset to last longer than 27 years in the future? Would we be sending the same money? I know it's a low amount of money from our perspective, but collectively it's all our money. It's provincial money and our money, right? So should we be looking at a better road surface if 27 years is the limit on that asset?
I think we're not looking at rebuilding the whole road. We're just trying to resurface the top. So it's a rehabilitation, not a reconstruction. So it's not to rebuild the asset. It's only extend the life of the asset. So we're only taking, currently there's about 120 millimeters of asphalt. We're only going to take off the top 2 inches, 50 mils. I'll stay in the same units and just resurface that.
So it's a reasonable expectation that we should be expecting to pay those kinds of dollars every 27 years on a resurface.
I mean, it always is going to depend on a lot of characteristics on the construction, the quality construction, the quality materials that went in. Was it raining the day they paved? It's going to depend on a lot of different criteria, and that's why PC values are done biannually if we can, obviously, to track the degradation, because we're not always going to have a straight line degradation. So we'd like to maximize the amount of years we get on them. In this particular asset, with the funding opportunity that's presented itself, we see this as a way to invest partnership dollars into something to extend an asset's life.
So I just like to understand the now, the past, the now, and the future. So 27 years later, we do a resurface. How many years are we expecting before we'll be back to doing will the resurface hold for another 27 years before we have to do a complete regraft the whole road, or is it going to last longer before we have to go and dig the whole thing up?
Well, I didn't bring a. There you go. I don't want to say the word, but. So I don't remember if last budget year you saw the graph I brought to council where it talked about, the asset starts here and then goes down. The idea is to catch it halfway down and go back up, so we're not spending all that money at once. So the idea is to catch it before it gets to a point where we have to redo the base, redo the gravel, redo everything. That's the point of this rehabilitation. So yeah.
Comment, I think 27 years is fabulous for a paved surface on a 4-lane road. That is a remarkable achievement, if you ask me. So then, any further questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. The next item on the agenda is the Community Services, Parks and Recreation Staff Report, and it has to do with the Beach Volleyball Club Agreement. And our Director of Community Services, Jane Jaggett, will present.
Thank you. The Social Athletics of Saugeen Shores Club has been operating beach volleyball for the past 4 years at the Port Elgin Main Beach. They currently have about 450 members. The municipality has facilitated the growth of the club's activities by installing posts and providing storage space for equipment. Staff also drags the courts once a week to ensure the courts are in a safe condition for play. Currently, there are 9 courts at the beach. In 2015, the higher water levels and resulted reduced space for beach patrons and certainly gave us a compressed area of activity for play. The existing courts on the beach are getting a considerable amount of play, not only during league time, but also formally during non-league times. Given the growth of the club, staff have worked with them to devise a usage agreement for the 2016 season. The attached agreement identifies the roles of the parties and that in recognition of the limited exclusive use of the beach space provided to the club, that a sum of $2,000 will be paid by the club towards municipal projects. The club is aware that no more than 9 courts will be provided on the beach and that the agreement is for 1 year only and will be reviewed at the end of the current season. They have agreed to work with staff to ensure that a number of volleyball courts are relocated to a less active locations in 2016 to ensure patrons utilizing the playground area are at a comfortable distance. The club continues to partner with local establishments to provide opportunities for promotion of eating at local establishments. And the club has enhanced the vitality of the Port Elgin Main Beach by encouraging athletes to compete and spectators to enjoy some great action volleyball. And we certainly look forward to the continued partnership.
Thank you, Jane. And the recommendation is that the attached agreement with the Social Athletics of Saugeen Shores Club to operate a beach volleyball league at the Port Elgin Main Beach for the 2016 summer season be approved. Questions or comments? We'll start down here. Councillor Mike Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jane, I have a question, but and it relates to the 9 courts, Monday through Wednesday. I want to make a comment, too, about I'd just like to commend you and the Beach Volleyball League organizers for providing I believe, a wonderful service for the community. And I know 9 courts takes up a fair amount of beach space, especially with high lake levels. But the 2 questions I have were in the agreement. It really doesn't state there's 9 courts they use Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. One thing I think unless I missed it, Jane, but do they not remove nets certain time, like from Thursday through to Sunday? Are there not a certain number of nets that are actually taken down so it creates more beach space? That was my first question. And has the league been pretty receptive? Again, I've asked this question before, but are you making good progress, Jane, with realigning where the courts will be placed in 2016? We talked about the Bandshell and South End, and what progress are we making with that? And are nets removed for those other 4 days of the week?
Yes, nets are removed for those other 4 days a week, and we take down about 4 of them, depending on how busy that they tend to be. But we tend to take down the nets that are in our, I'll say, the active areas of the beach where we have most of the pedestrian traffic. The location of the courts for 2016, I think was your second question. We've met with the club a couple of times to negotiate where those areas could potentially be. And with the conflicting or the changing water levels, we appreciate the fact that they may change annually as well. What we had the ability to do this past fall was we worked with the Lake Huron Coastal Conservation, and we recognized that 2 of the dune areas weren't thriving to what we were expecting they would be. And we were given permission to remove those 2 dune areas. And in doing that, we've acquired some additional beach space for the courts to go, which is close to the promenade, so not so much closer to the bathing area of the beach.
Mr. Madison?
I'm good. My question was answered. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jane, for this is a good agreement, I think, one that deals with a lot of the issues that have been raised and deals with them well and in partnership with this important club. And I think it's to everybody's benefit that we sign this deal and that things carry on with this group. I just had one concern, though, with item 2F in the agreement, and it has to do with noise, and it instructs that no any sound or noise from or created by any radio or musical sound producing instrument of whatsoever kind will not be permitted before 9 a.m. or after 11 p.m., which is fine on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it violates the noise bylaw through the week. And so I think probably it would be ideal from my perspective to see that wording changed so that the hours where amplified noise are permitted align with what's in the noise bylaw, so that we don't create a de facto approval here for ongoing violations of the noise bylaw on the main beach. That could get us into trouble. So I'm sure that I imagine, because their usage for events and stuff would only be on weekends anyway, so it shouldn't create a problem for them, and I think it would just be a good idea to clean that up if possible. Comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think you can probably bring that back for the council, for the bylaw. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jane, my first question also involved the noise restriction clause. Mine was about the fact that it refers to any radio, musical, or sound-producing instrument of whatsoever kind. Does that include the human voice?
No.
Okay. Should we put that in? Like, I mean, if people are out there yelling and carrying on
I think
after
if
11
we,
p.m.?
from what I'm hearing, I think if we reference the noise bylaw, the majority of those issues, we can certainly.
Okay, now my other question is about Mr. Kelly's letter that came in to us this afternoon. Did you have an opportunity to review that?
I saw that, yes.
And he asked a question about beer and what are the restrictions on that? I just wondered why that came up.
The volleyball club does 2 tournaments a year, which is separate from this agreement. So that's through our booking process, and they acquire a liquor license for that event. So they go through our municipal alcohol policy for that process.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I think this is a great way to have more activity at the beach. The agreement, though, is for basically 12 weeks of the year. $2,000, that's about $150 a week. Does that even cover the cost of the work that we do there? And I'm not, in a disagreement with the idea, but at the very least we should be recovering our costs. And I would question, for the things that are mentioned in there, does $150 a week do it?
Like I said, we only drag 1 day a week, and we have staff down in that area already doing maintenance at the beach. I think the fact that we've put this for a 1-year agreement allows us an opportunity to review this agreement with them, certainly to determine if it is feasible for them to continue, and I need to be cognizant of that as well. They're a great group that is bringing a lot more than just beach volleyball to this community. They are willing to work with us. They want to meet on a regular basis. So I think the $2,000 is a good starting point. I hear what you're saying, and it certainly was a considerable amount of our conversation when we met. They felt it may be a stretch, but I think if they can evaluate their fees as well, then hopefully we can come up with a conclusion and work towards a more definite long-term plan with a fee that we feel is probably better suited.
A follow-up then, and I don't believe this exists, but if a group came and they wanted to have the use of a number of the soccer fields for 3 nights a week for that extended period of time, what would they pay?
Well, they pay our facility booking right now. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm just it's just I'm just curious how this would match up with some of the other rates that people would pay for using facilities, because we've just had a presentation from minor hockey, which they pay approximately $112 an hour based on the subsidy for the use of the ice. Well, there's a number of hours here over 12 weeks. I realize ice and the sand are not necessarily the same commodity, but anyway, I appreciate your comment about it's a 1-year agreement, and I would encourage that we sort of track the expenses that the town incurs, and so that in the future there's an opportunity to at least have that part of the discussion. Thank you.
Further questions? And all in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is communications, petitions for committee of whole information, and I believe there is 19 items there this evening. Anybody has a question or comment? We'll start with you, Deputy Mayor Sherburne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if Stuart would you just make a comment for us on item 7, the drinking water systems inspection report? Could you just advise us, due to our special responsibility in reviewing that, could you just give us a public statement about what that says?
if no one's had the opportunity to read it, I spent a bit of time today doing so. Again, it's mostly a boilerplate from last year with a rehash of what our system includes, the components. But the good news is in the last 2 pages where we're again 100% compliance and there's no regulatory recommendations this year again.
Councillor Grace.
Follow-up question on that. The report also indicates that there are 2 items where actions are required. One asking for providing a new CT calculation based on a worst-case scenario involving Giardia, and that needs to be submitted to a provincial officer by January 29th, 2016. The other one is that the operations manual is out of date, that the current one is from January 2008, and that should be updated every 2 years. That's due June 1st, 2016, although we do meet minimum standards of the license. So my question is a request for Council to be informed when those 2 deadlines are met.
The second one will be addressed as part of the submission on February 2nd with the water license. So that's just regarding to contact times in the chamber. That'll be addressed, and again, it's just a calculation that they want to have proven. So, and the first one is, we're already working on it with Aqua. So, yep. No
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to look at number 9. I see Mr. Lamont is here tonight. He sent in a letter asking some questions. As part of the Recreation and Active Transportation Committee, Council appointed this committee to make recommendations to Council. And Mr. Lamont, I'd like for us to explain to Mr. Lamont why those recommendations that were made by the committee were overturned without any explanation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm struggling with that because I think we had a vote and it was very close, so we're going to ask all 9 of us. But I think the general discussion at that time was that, and we heard it here, I think the discussion to the delegation, I think, addressed it fairly well, was that we needed that information in the broader context of the whole scheme of things, that we didn't like to look at one rate at a time. And not that we don't disagree with it, but I think it was just kind of premature until we get to that stage. And I'm trying to paraphrase some of the things that were said around here because it was a vote of this committee that resulted in that. And we will disagree from time to time, and that's not the worst thing in the world. But we certainly appreciate your input to this, and I think, unless anybody else wants to speak to it, I think that was certainly the general gist of the discussion, that we wanted to see this in the broader context of the entire fee schedule. And I think one of the things, was raised again tonight was for minor hockey, certainly this subsidy, because there was some idea about perhaps that was a better way of addressing it. The issues around minor hockey was to increase the subsidy directly to minor hockey. So I hope that kind of answers your question. You can go around and ask individually people why they voted in a particular way, but I don't know that I think that probably encapsulates it, unless somebody disagrees with what I've said. Okay. Councillor Mike Matt.
We have number 5. I'm just wondering about the Minister of Transportation Ontario Green Investment Fund, and it's a new $20 million announcement by the Minister of Transportation to do with electrical vehicle charges, charging Ontario grant program. I'm just wondering, through you, to Mr. Mayor, to our CEO, Larry, our electrical car charging program, the one station's been placed over in Southampton by the town hall, I believe. Another one is due to go in this spring, and you just refresh my memory where it's going. And secondly, in light of this new $20 million fund, are we ahead of the game, I guess? Are there many municipalities that bought into this program before this fund was announced? Is there a need in our community to look at additional stations or not? Should we be applying for this, or were you doing just fine? I wasn't sure how the program was going, Larry.
Mr. Mayor, the second unit is intended to be immediately north of the Visitor Information Center on Emma Street, so close to the downtown core, Port Elgin. So that's where the second unit will go. And if you'll recall, it was a partnership with Bruce Power that brought both of those units to the community. So it wasn't something through this particular program that we had access to. And so I think from our perspective, we're well ahead of a lot of Grey, Bruce, and Huron in terms of having a municipally supplied facility like that. And so I think that we've asked the Chamber of Commerce to encourage its members to look at this program. When it came in, we shipped it over to Joanne just before Christmas.
And Don, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got two additional items. One is it's relevant to the Source Water Protection Plan report and minutes. The Source Water Protection legislation requires that municipalities submit a risk management plan by the end of last year, by the end of December 2015. At least that's my understanding. What are we doing on that?
Stuart can probably answer that. I think we're a little different on this particular. Go ahead, Stuart.
So currently we don't have any risks in Saugeen Shores to submit a risk management plan for. So if you read further on in the newsletter onto page, sorry, I don't have pages on there, but there's a section called Technical Advisory Working Group Update. That's what we're part of. So we won't actually have a policy likely approved by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change until mid-year. And at that point, the clock will start for us to get a risk management office in place. And then we have another time frame to get the risk management plans in place.
Okay, thank you. My next question is about the Smart Growth for Our Communities Act letter. And I know that, I guess this probably is to our CAO, but I know you didn't write the letter, but I found it confusing. I'm thinking of, I think this was on the third page under the heading, Increasing Certainty, Stability, and Reducing Costs. It talks about limiting requests for amendments to new official plans and or new comprehensive zoning bylaws for 2 years after the documents are approved. Do you know, does that mean that the scope of requests for amendments for the first 2 years is limited in the scope, or is it limited to 2 years after the adoption and not permitted after? What does that mean? Do you know?
Mr. Mayor, I will confess we have not totally digested the implications of what's here. What I understand is that the regulations that got adopted are less prescriptive than were originally proposed. A lot of communities had great fear that if council did adopt an OP or a zoning bylaw that they would be precluded from entertaining real important changes to it that have occurred since that date. But I believe there's a bit of wiggle room in there that we're still trying to understand through our discussions with the county planning staff.
So we'll be getting some kind of report on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. On a sort of sad note, there's a letter in here that we've been denied funding through the Small Building Canada Fund again. Can you just remind us of what project we submitted for that one? Is that the water tower one? Gobles Grove?
Yeah, that's the Gobles Grove application.
Councillor, have you got a question? Go ahead, Neil. No, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So number 10, the concerned citizens of Bruce County. So on your recommendation, I'd like council to know that I will put a notice of motion in asking for a procedural bylaw change that asks that people, it currently says somebody should sign a letter of communication, and I will ask that not only do they sign it, but that they print their name afterwards and they offer their resident address and a contact phone number so that we know who we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Madison. Sorry. Thanks for your patience.
Back to number 5 of the Green Investment Fund. Do we have a way of tracking, and this is to our CO, do we have a way of tracking the number of charges that are used at the station at this moment? I'm
going to say yes, we do. What specifically that is, I'm not 100% certain.
is that something that we monitor? Is that something that Bruce Power monitors? Just, which leads into the question that Councillor Mayat asked, how many are using it? Do we need more?
They're good questions. I know Bruce Power aren't concerned about it. They just wanted to have us, they help us put them in place. I suspect that there's to be that's a good question. I think we should know, because if this thing is used in quite a bit, then perhaps we need more. But in the same breath, I think that program offers, and I admire go to the chamber, because I think there's probably private sector operators out there that would love to provide that service, that we should not have to do that through the town. So but still, it would be nice to know how many people are using those ones, and I think we can probably find that out somehow. We'll find out for you. Okay?
If we could have a little report within the next month or so, just to see what we've used to this point.
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
I just want to throw out a bouquet. Just a great job, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Madison.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, last one. I'd like to take this opportunity. We have the new president of the Chamber of Commerce in our audience tonight, and I'd like to recognize Mr. Pierre Danini as the new president, so we look forward to working with him.
Congratulations, Pierre. I'm sure you'll do a great job. So that's the next item on the agenda then, I guess, is we do have an information report, and it has to do with the financial plans for our water financial plan. And it's there. I don't know if you want to speak to it, Stuart, or if there's any comments on it. Sure.
Yeah, just very briefly. I just wanted to make sure Council understood what the report was for. I think if we pass to the bottom of the report, we just wanted to give Council a bit of a heads up that at the next meeting, this financial plan will be on your desk. And for us to submit the application for the water license, we will need a resolution at that meeting. So we'll try to get it out. We planned on having it at this agenda. We fell a bit behind on it, but we should.
Thank you, Stuart. So that's the end of our agenda. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Madison and Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, all in favor? We're adjourned, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes, which would be 8:45.